All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. And of course, I want to thank you all for taking the time out to listen to our program. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedbacks, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. If I sound a little bit different or a little bit congested, I'm fighting a sinus infection right now. For I'm on all kinds of antibiotics and cough syrups to clear the congestion out. So if you would have asked me Thursday into Friday and Friday into Saturday if I would have done a broadcast this week, the answer probably would have been no. But since we're feeling a lot better, not 100%, but they're feeling a lot better, so I decided to go ahead and give this broadcast a try. And in tonight's program, we are going to do our review of the fight between Sergey the Crusher Kovalev and Saul Canelo Alvarez. Now, definitely we previewed the fight on our last program. I don't think anybody was really surprised by the outcome, but let's go ahead and let's review the fight or give our take on the fight itself. Round one, felt that Sergey Kovalev controlled the action with his jab. I thought he definitely dictated the pace. He dictated the distance. Wasn't landing the jab hard and really landing the jab at all. Really using it as a range finder, something to gauge the distance and to keep Canelo off. And I thought that was the same pattern you saw in the first 3 rounds, where I thought Kovalev was using his jab, pawing it out there, while I think Canelo was blocking the jabs with his high guard, the winky right high guard, obviously avoiding Kovalev's power punch was the straight right hand or the overhand right. And I just felt that Kovalev did control the action with his jab. I mean, clearly was throwing more jabs than Canelo was actually throwing total punches. So I gave a lot of the early rounds to Sergey Kovalev. And even in the fourth round, it looked that Kovalev finally landed his first body punch, which was a left hook to the body against Canelo Alvarez. And I never understood why people don't attack Canelo Alvarez to the body more, because Floyd Mayweather did that in their fight back in 2013. And that's something that Triple G never did in any of their two fights. So I thought that Kovalev was winning the fight, at least in the first 3 rounds. Now, announcers on the show said that being the fact that Kovalev was throwing his jab, but he wasn't landing, you really can't score it. If anything, they were trying to give Canelo Alvarez the points. I thought as the middle rounds wore on, Kovalev was still controlling the action, but Canelo was able to find his range. He was able to get inside. Clearly, Canelo played the counter-punching game, where he would wait for Kovalev to throw his hard punches and try to counter, I could say, over Kovalev's hard punches, especially if he threw the hard right hand. Immediately, you knew a hard left hook was coming in return. And I thought new trainer Buddy McGirt actually had a good strategy where don't throw anything hard, basically just touch him up, score the points, and then definitely, that he wanted to rack the points up. And I'm speaking about Kovalev. As the fight went on, it looked as if Canelo did find his range. He was landing to the body. And as mentioned before, Sergey Kovalev is very soft to the midsection. I don't know what the story is there. But I thought that James Buddy McGirt and company had a good battle plan to use a jab, fight like the bigger guy, and to keep Canelo at distance. But as the fight went on, you found it different. You found it strange that Canelo was actually backing Kovalev up. So one can make an argument that Canelo was winning, what you judge in the fight about effective aggression, the fact that he was backing the larger guy up and the guy who was the champion. So definitely kind of interesting as the fight went on. I still had Kovalev winning the rounds by definitely using his jab. I maybe can give Canelo maybe the 6th and the 7th round. I thought Kovalev clearly won the 8th round, but there was clearly no power on his punches. It was just touch him up, score the points, and like the announcer said, to preserve the energy going into the later rounds. So, and I felt that was strange, where you come up with your battle plan so your guy doesn't get tired. Now, that's a bit different when people brought up Bernard Hopkins in his later years. Bernard Hopkins clearly had the stamina to to go 12 rounds. Now, as Larry Merchant used to say, he would fight with a half-court offense, but it wasn't a stamina issue with Bernard Hopkins because everybody knew that B-Hop was a fitness fanatic and had a high work rate. So the issue was more so as Bernard got older, instead of being the executioner and going out there and just slaying people, kind of take your time and breaking them down. Obviously, that comes with age. But with Sergey Kovalev, it seemed the plan was not to tire him out. So I was thinking during the fight that if Kovalev were to escape and win this fight, he might need to look into retirement because he looks slow. The punches look slow. They clearly don't have the same pop like they did. A few times he bopped Canelo, I think, and those were punches years ago that was putting guys to sleep. He very rarely attacked the body. I thought that when he did attack the body, he did have some success. Buddy McGirt was telling him if you get close inside to shoot the right hand or to shoot the right uppercut to the body. Kovalev tried to tie Canelo up when he got in close, trying to get his Bernard Hopkins on. But I thought that Canelo did a great job in thwarting the attempts to try to tie him up, which I think is definitely a great strategy on the inside. If you don't have an inside game, you tie the smaller man up and try to wear him down. So as the fight went on, again, I still had Kovalev winning because I thought that he was landing his throwing the jab. He was throwing more punches. I think at one point it showed it was like 400 punches, like 100 and something that Canelo Alvarez had thrown. So Kovalev was the busier fighter, and we do give people points for being the busier fighter, regardless if they're landing or not. So I still felt that Kovalev was winning the fight. I'm talking about a 3-4 round margin. If you go back and look at my Twitter timeline, in the first 5 rounds, I gave Kovalev 4 out of 5 rounds. So definitely I thought that Sergey Kovalev was controlling the action. Then in the 11th round, he was caught with an overhand right that kind of buckled him, then caught with the left hook, then drilled with a straight right on the chin, and literally everything just collapsed. You can kind of tell that the gas, that Sergey Kovalev's parachute was not opening. You can tell that there was no more left in the gas tank. And even kind of before that, you just saw that Canelo again started to push the pace a little bit, much like I felt he did in the first Triple G fight, where he really stepped it up in those 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds. So I think to secure the draw in that fight, or a fight that Triple G, had he stepped on the gas himself, he would have probably closed the deal. So I give Canelo Alvarez all the credit in the world for knowing the time to step on the gas pedal, and that's a product of preparation. That's a product of his work ethic. That's a product of his character and a product of his youth. So I give Canelo Alvarez all the credit in the world. As soon as Kovalev was knocked down, I mean, he fell on his knees, and clearly the ref waved the fight off immediately. So no point even counting a knockout victory in the 11th round for Canelo Alvarez. Well, I would say at this point of his career, probably his most satisfying victory. You can waffle back and forth between the Austin Trout fight, the James Kirkland fight, the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight, the James Kirkland fight, the Triple G fights. But I think it's probably the most satisfying of his career because you're clearly moving up in weight class to fight a bigger guy. And it was all agreed that Kovalev was a shell of himself. He clearly was not the same crusher as we knew him the previous half a decade. But I think all in all, an outstanding performance by Canelo Alvarez. And I think definitely did what he was supposed to do. I'm not going to take anything away from him. Yes, he fought an older guy, 36 years old, and that's careful matchmaking on his part, and whatever animosity that exists between him and Oscar De La Hoya or him and Golden Boy Promotions, that'll be something that'll be discussed at a later time. But definitely a great KO victory for Canelo Alvarez. The question is, would he stay at 175 pounds to fight guys like Dimitri Bivol? I don't know. A lot of killers in the 175-pound division. So he might move back down to 168, might move back down to 160, possibly for a third fight with Triple G. Now, something interesting, and I think about Andre Ward, who was in my honorable mention as my top fighters of all time, does make you wonder if Andre Ward didn't retire and Kovalev is moving up in weight, how would that fight fare? So just something to kind of gnaw on. It'll probably do that in our fantasy, our Chin Check Radio Perfect World fantasy fight. So just kind of some food for thought. If Andre Ward hadn't retired after the 2 victories over Sergey Kovalev and Canelo's moving up in weight, this is probably the time that they would have fought this year or last year. Kind of makes you wonder how would that have turned out. But that's the point of boxing, and that's what we can always dream for that. So definitely an excellent fight by Canelo Alvarez. All the credit in the world to him. Fighting a bigger guy, definitely taking a step-up fight. And winning titles in the junior middleweight division, the middleweight division, the super middleweight division, and now the light heavyweight division. So kudos to Canelo Alvarez. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons why I decided to create Chin Check Radio, and I talked about this in my first episode, and it's worth talking about it again, is my love for boxing. Well, really my love for sports, but for certain sports, i.e. boxing, mixed martial arts, football, but specifically the Dallas Cowboys. Now, and I mentioned this on my first broadcast, if you give me a big boxing match versus a UFC fight, I'm probably going to take the boxing match 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10. And I've always felt that boxing never gets the credit that it deserves. People only come along, or what I call them fair weather fans, where people come along only for the big fights, and they have comments, or you hear things that, I just want to see the guy get knocked out, and any fight that's not a knockout is a boring fight, even though I can see a tactical strategy that's involved, even though I can see a guy setting up his game plan, even though I can see a guy setting up his trap, even though a guy is using his jab beautifully or throwing punches to the body. So I think that boxing doesn't get the credit that it really deserves, especially nowadays with the fast-paced world that we live in and the rise of mixed martial arts. And I say all that to say, I do this show to give boxing the respect that it deserves and the respect that I feel that it's lacking in boxing. But the problem that I have is, if boxing is not going to get the respect that it deserves if it doesn't respect itself. And for those of you like myself who watched the fight on the Zone Network, there was no reason for that fight to begin at 1 o'clock a.m. I felt that was totally disgusting. And the thing to me that really upset me during this evening was the fighter was supposed to walk out to the ring around midnight or 12:20 Eastern Standard Time, 9 o'clock or 9:20 Pacific Standard Time. And there was a delay, and I kept wondering, what is the delay for in the fight? Let's get the guys ready and let's get them walking out. And there was a delay in the fight because they gave people the opportunity to watch the UFC event on the big screen. So you delay a championship fight for the UFC between fighters who have a combined 14 losses between them. I felt that was disgusting, and I agree with what Sergey Morris said. You delay the start of a championship fight to watch a UFC fight. Boxing took one on the chin. I felt that was very embarrassing to the sport of boxing. I think boxing fans should be upset by that, because what if you had a fight party and the main event doesn't start until 1 o'clock in the morning? That was ridiculous. And I had an issue with that. And it wasn't in that type of fight. I could see maybe if it was a John Jones versus Daniel Cormier the first time, or a John Jones versus a Stipe, or a John Jones versus a Francis Ngannou, or a John Jones versus a Brock Lesnar, or a George St. Pierre versus an Anderson Silva. I can see those level of UFC fights, but to postpone the start of a championship match where a guy is trying to make history versus 2 guys in the UFC, again, no disrespect to those guys, but guys who have a combined 14 losses between them and were not even fighting for a title. The title they were fighting for was a bad mother sucker belt, and substitute the F in front of the word sucker. And they were fighting for that belt, which means no official UFC title was on the line. And you decide to postpone the start of your light heavyweight championship with perhaps your biggest star. So Canelo Alvarez is probably the post-Mayweather era, probably the biggest star in boxing right now, probably the biggest box office draw. So He's possibly the biggest star in boxing, but definitely the biggest box office draw in boxing. And you delay the start of the fight with your biggest draw, trying to make history for a UFC fight. I felt boxing took it. I felt they took one on the chin. I agree with announcer Sergey Mora that boxing definitely lost that round, and the people who run the zone or who ran that card in that arena should be disgusted by that, because when the hell has ever a Muhammad Ali fight taken a back seat? And that's way before my time. Or a Mike Tyson fight has taken a back seat. A Roy Jones fight. A Bernard Hopkins fight. Now we're getting into my era. An Oscar De La Hoya fight. A Manny Pacquiao fight. A Floyd Mayweather fight. If that fight is in town, that is a main event in town. So to take a back seat, to delay the start of that fight, to watch the UFC, and again, this is not a knock on the UFC, I'm talking about just for boxing. If boxing wants the respect that it used to have and wants the respect on the world stage, that shouldn't happen. If you have a start time on the fight, you have a start time on the fight. When you don't want to divide the audience, tough. Those people in that arena were there to see the boxing match. If they wanted to see the UFC fight, they can go to where the UFC fight was. So I definitely did not agree with that. I thought it was disgusting for the officials. Whoever made a decision to delay, whether it's the promoters, the executives, the TV executives, or the streaming executives, whoever in the hell made that decision, I thought it was disgusting, and it definitely made boxing look bad. Also, on DAZN. Now again, that was my first time watching a championship fight on the DAZN network. I just want to say, bring back HBO. And because there was a lot of talking, a lot of babbling before the main event. I don't know where they find these people from to just be up there talking. So I'm going to be patient. I want to give it a try. I don't want to just jump off the bandwagon. But it was definitely different watching boxing. Even the ring announcer, again, I'm not trying to diss the guy, but the local fights that I've been in, or my old boxing gym, the local fights that those guys have fought in, the ring announcer for this fight sounds just like the guy who was calling local, low-level, or club fights. You don't get that Michael Buffer, Jimmy Lennon Jr., when they announce the fighters, you feel that electricity, you feel that palpable energy. That's just, it's something that you just didn't feel it with this announcer on DAZN. So maybe Michael Buffer or Jimmy Lennon, I don't know if they're in a contract. That'll be something I'll have to look up. So definitely a lot of changes watching these fights now on different streaming services, ESPN+, DAZN versus HBO. WBC champion Deontay Wilder still fights for Showtime, so you'll still get that big fight feel. You still get that energy, but it was definitely different watching it on DAZN. I definitely miss HBO. I'll say it again. I definitely miss HBO. And guess what? I'll even say it a third time. I definitely miss HBO. But that's where we are now in the future with DAZN streaming service. So I already paid for my year, so I'll try to get my money's worth and try to enjoy the action and definitely the love I have for boxing will not die. Now, again, there was a lot of talking. I guess they had to fill in, being that the fight with Ryan Garcia ended in the first round knockout. They had to do a lot of fill-in time, and it was just talking after babble after babble, and people just up there talking. So that was kind of annoying, but I give Brian Kenny and Sergio Moro all the credit in the world. I don't know what Chris Mannix was scoring in that fight, but definitely, all in all, I think a great night for boxing if you're a boxing fan. But again, it is a slap in the face for you to be postponed while a UFC fight reaches its conclusion, where you are the main card in Las Vegas. So definitely wanted to give our review on the Sergey Kovalev and Canelo Alvarez fight. And until the next time, Mr. Chin Check Radio signing off.